Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me. You are listening to the account with the report for day 417 of the war in Ukraine. This is the first proper report since Monday, April 10th, or day 411 of the war. You can find links to the recap videos in the description. Today is the Orthodox Easter holiday. There are a few updates I want to go over regarding this topic. I also have one article I want to point out. All other updates are grouped into the usual: situation inside Ukraine, the occupied territories, Russia and Belarus, and international developments. Before we start the news though, the flashpoints along the front. Bakhmut. Since my last frontline update, not much has changed. Heavy fighting continues in Bakhmut. Videos shared on social media show large amounts of what is claimed to be dead Russian paratroopers and Wagner mercenaries. Some Russian channels claim that Russia managed to capture the hills north of Bodanivka. It is unlikely, but if they did, it would make their eventual westward advance easier and would open a path to advance on the northern tip of Chasiv Yar. Wagner mercenaries claim to have liberated 2 more quarters in the northwestern and southeastern parts of Bakhmut. Avdiivka. Practically nothing has changed here since the last update. Marinka. Currently, it seems like Russia is focusing their assaults in this area. Defenders had to repel numerous attacks over the past 24 hours. And now for the article I wanted to point out, titled Empty Streets, Pools of Blood, and Memories of a Failed Collaborator. Life in liberated Vovchansk under constant fire. Vovchansk is a town in the Chuhuiv district of Kharkiv Oblast in Ukraine's east and a former district capital. It lies 70 kilometers from Kharkiv and is only 5 kilometers away from Ukraine's border with the Russian Federation. Ukrainska Pravda visited the devastated town to hear from local residents about life under bombardment and occupation, their local Russian-appointed puppet leader and collaborators, and people's reluctance to leave their homes. Please consider reading the article. And to start the news segment, the updates on the Orthodox Easter celebration. Today is the Orthodox Easter celebration. The Orthodox Church of Ukraine has held the first Easter service in the Kiev-Peczersk Lavra. President Volodymyr Zelensky has recorded an Easter address to Ukrainians from the premises of the Kiev-Peczersk Lavra. Today, we celebrate the Easter holiday with unshakable faith in our victory. We have already come a long way. Perhaps the most difficult of peaks is ahead. We will overcome it. And together we will meet our dawn when the sun will rise over our entire country. This is a blue and yellow flag. It will certainly be raised in all our God-given land, in all territories temporarily occupied by devils, Zelensky noted. Ukraine and Russia have held a major Easter prisoner of war exchange. 130 Ukrainian POWs have returned home from Russian captivity on Orthodox Easter, the President's office head Andriy Yermak reported. Ukrainian soldiers have shared pictures and stories of how they celebrate this year's Easter holiday in the trenches and how they prepare holiday gifts for the enemy. On the other side, Russian President Vladimir Putin has congratulated all Orthodox Christians on Easter. The wonderful, beloved Easter holiday gives believers hope, inspires good thoughts and deeds, and serves to affirm high moral ideals and values in society, Putin said. Putin attended the Easter service at the Cathedral of Christ the Savior, arriving at the church around midnight. The president was dressed in a formal suit, holding a lit church candle in his hands. The solemn prayer service in honor of the holiday was performed by the Patriarch of Moscow and all Rus, Kirill. Of course, Russia also used the Easter holiday for propaganda reasons, as the Kremlin is seeking to more and more weaponize religion. For example, the head of the Wagner PMC, Yevgeny Prigozhin, ordered the transfer of a large group of prisoners to Ukraine on occasion of Easter. Russian state media also celebrated the transfer of the Holy Fire from Jerusalem to the Luhansk People's Republic and the Donetsk People's Republic. Additionally, the Kremlin-appointed governor of Zaporizhia Oblast, Yevhen Balitsky, announced that the Holy Fire was delivered to the Temple of Melitopol and it will be distributed to all the churches of the Zaporizhia Oblast. A look at all the minor updates out of Ukraine. During the night of Orthodox Easter, Russia has launched a missile attack on Snihurivka in Mykolaiv Oblast, firing 10 S-300 missiles, attacked Kherson Oblast 70 times, having fired 419 projectiles, and massively shelled Zaporizhia Oblast. Search and rescue operations at the 5-story residential building in Sloviansk have been completed, with a total of 15 people killed and 24 injured as a result of the Russian attack on the city on April 14th. Metropolitan Epiphanius of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine claimed that the structures of the Russian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate were involved in the preparation for and implementation of Russian aggression against Ukraine. Alexei Reznikov, the defense minister of Ukraine, has said in an interview that the Ukrainian delegation was unsure whether it would return home from a trip to Minsk for talks with Russia at the beginning of the war. Reznikov also stated that the losses on the Ukrainian side during the full-scale war are less than the number of victims of the earthquake in Turkey. Victims and their family members have told Human Rights Watch about torture and other ill treatment they faced in the city of Kherson and its vicinity during the Russian occupation. Units of the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine's Ministry of Defense are currently training combat operations using the US-made Black Hawk helicopter. According to a pilot with a call sign Maestro, Black Hawk helicopters are already taking an active part in hostilities, including on enemy territory. Next up, the latest regarding the situation in the occupied territories. Enerhodar reported that Russian occupation authorities have begun to evacuate children from schools and kindergarten in the temporarily occupied city of Enerhodar, Zaporizhia Oblast to Crimea. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. Li Shangfu, China's newly appointed defense minister, visited Russia on his first official visit abroad and met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. During the meeting, Putin said that Chinese leader Xi Jinping's recent visit to Russia was very productive and that relations between Russia and China are developing well in all areas, including militarily. Questions related to Russia's so-called special military operation in Ukraine will be included in the Unified State exams in history as soon as the corresponding textbooks are delivered. Kadyrov, the head of Chechnya, has refused to meet with Chechen POWs returned from captivity in Ukraine, blaming them for letting themselves be captured, as he believes that a Chechen soldier should have no reason to be in captivity. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. South Korea and Germany agreed to work together on diplomatic and economic measures to support Ukraine. Italian Environment and Energy Security Minister Gilberto Pichetto Fratin said in an interview today that Italy is no longer dependent on Russian gas as an energy resource. Italy plans to transfer a total of 60 M109 self-propelled artillery howitzers to Ukraine in the near future, and some of them are already on the front line. As of mid-April 2023, Germany's Federal Criminal Police Office received 337 reports on alleged war crimes in Ukraine. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva stated that he raised the possibility for mediation in the war in Ukraine with China and the United Arab Emirates and called for the formation of a political G20 to end the war. And now for the intelligence report segment, starting with the UK Ministry of Defense. General Colonel Mikhail Teplinsky, commander of Russia's Corps of Airborne Troops, the VDV, has highly likely returned to a major role in Ukraine. He was previously dismissed from the theater in January 2023. Teplinsky is likely one of the few senior Russian generals widely respected by the rank and file. His recent turbulent career suggests intense tensions between factions within the Russian general staff about Russia's military approach in Ukraine. It is unlikely Teplinsky's remit will be limited to VDV units, but he is highly likely to promote the core traditional role as an elite force. In recent days, the VDV have resumed a key mission in the battle for Bakhmut and likely undertaken novel integration with TOS-1A thermobaric rocket launchers in the Kremina sector. A look at the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. Reporting from some Western sources that Wagner Group financier Yevgeny Prigozhin called for Russia to end its war against Ukraine is inaccurate. I have mentioned this as well in the report for day 415. Please keep this new information in mind. The essay on a potential Ukrainian counteroffensive and the future of the war miscontextualized a rhetorical statement in which Prigozhin established a strawman argument he attributed to Russia's internal enemies who seek to rationalize Russia ending the war in Ukraine now. The point of his essay was to attack the strawman, not to advance it. Prigozhin actually called on Russia to commit to a decisive fight that will either defeat Ukraine or result in a temporary Russian defeat that will catalyze Russia's nationalist rebirth and set conditions for future victory. Reading Prigozhin's public communications is not a straightforward undertaking. Much of the nuance included in Prigozhin's speech is lost when translating Russian to English. Prigozhin has an idiosyncratic rhetorical and writing style that relies heavily on deadpan sarcasm, selective ambiguity, aphorisms, vulgarity, and ironic slang. Prigozhin's isolated quotes, separated from the full context of his messages, often lose their initial meaning. Certain Russian players in the information space have also misinterpreted Prigozhin's essay, further exposing fissures between some Russian mill bloggers. The Russian information space is reckoning with demographic transitions within Russia in a way that indicates that the nationalist ideologies underpinning the war in Ukraine will continue to have reverberating domestic impacts. Russian President Vladimir Putin's United Russia Party intends to recruit Russian military personnel who have served in Ukraine as candidates for elections in 2023 and 2024, likely in an effort to establish itself as the definitive pro-war party in Russia. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. The Russian Federation continues to wage a war of aggression, completely ignores international humanitarian law, continues to attack the territory of Ukraine with anti-aircraft guided missiles, and bombards non-military objects. Over the past day, the enemy launched 25 missile strikes from the S-300 air defense system on the peaceful cities of Zaporizhia, Komyshuvaha in the Zaporizhia Oblast, and Snihurivka in the Mykolaiv Oblast, as well as 28 airstrikes. The enemy carried out 4 attacks from rocket salvo systems on the positions of our troops and the civilian infrastructure of populated areas. There are dead and injured civilians, high-rise and private residential buildings, civilian educational institutions, hospitals, churches, and other civilian infrastructure have been destroyed and damaged. The Russian aggressor continues to use terror tactics. The probability of launching missile and airstrikes throughout the territory of Ukraine remains high. The enemy suffers considerable losses, but does not give up its plans to occupy our territory. The enemy continues to focus its main efforts on conducting offensive actions in the Liman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and Marinka directions. The enemy actively uses operational, tactical, and army aviation in the specified directions. Bakhmut and Marinka remain at the epicenter of hostilities. During the day, our defenders repulsed more than 45 enemy attacks on the indicated areas of the front. In the Liman direction, the enemy conducted unsuccessful offensives in the area north of Zaliy, Horivka, and near Spirne. In the Bakhmut direction, the enemy continues to conduct offensive actions. The battles for the city of Bakhmut do not stop. The enemy carried out attacks in the areas of Khomove and Ivanivske settlements without success. In the Avdiivka direction, the enemy carried out offensive actions in the Novokalinove, Siverne, Vodiane, and Pervomaiske areas of the Donetsk Oblast without success. In the Marinka direction, our defenders repelled numerous enemy attacks in the Marinka area. The enemy continues to conduct defensive operations in the Zaporizhia and Kherson directions. Russian occupation forces continue to suffer heavy losses. All medical facilities in the temporarily occupied territory are full of wounded invaders. As a result, the enemy uses civilian educational institutions of the temporarily occupied territories for their own purposes. Thus, in the village of Vysoke, Zaporizhia Oblast, the occupiers converted the sports hall of the local school into a military hospital. Medical services are provided exclusively to Russian servicemen. As of April 15th, about 100 occupiers with injuries of varying degrees of severity were being treated. Russian invaders continue to rob the civilian population of Ukraine, appropriating the grain harvest of peaceful citizens of Ukraine. So, in the city of Berdyansk, Zaporizhia Oblast, the so-called Russian occupation authorities are trying to export stolen corn by loading it onto a barge. At the same time, the Russian occupiers continue the forced passporting of the population of the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. In particular, in the settlement of Tavria of the Kherson region, the invaders are actively conducting home visits of local residents in order to check the presence of a Russian passport. Citizens of Ukraine who have not received a Russian passport have been informed that if the documents are not issued by June 1st, such a person will be deported with the confiscation of all personal property. And that concludes today's report. If you're interested in any of the details to any articles I mentioned, you can find links to them in the description as usual. If you enjoyed the report and found it informative, please consider sharing it with others and giving me a like. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.